Hi everybody, this is Dr. Lisa Love, and this is a video that compares aegis wisdom versus integral, or the Bailey model versus the integral model, comparing Bailey's 10 evolutionary groups with what the integral model has to say. You're joining me for a cup of coffee here, or tea, or whatever you like. And this particular video is going to put an emphasis on Bailey's group 6 and how it lines up with the integral model. Here we go. So if you're not already familiar with Bailey's model, I really encourage you to go look at some of my videos explaining it. But in general, there are 7 different levels, which are the physical plane, the emotional plane, the mental plane, the intuitional or Buddhic plane, the spiritual or Atmic plane. And then we have 2 particular levels right here, which are the monadic plane and the divine plane. And this is where we're no longer human per se. And within Bailey's model, we also have 3 main stages. And those stages are becoming human, or the integrated personality, where we're on the path of individuation. And this is where, of her 10 evolutionary groups, we find groups 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Becoming soul, which ego is the same as soul in her model. It doesn't mean selfish. That would be more her integrated personality. But you become the ego, or the soul-infused personality, on the path of initiation, and that is her groups 7 and 8. And you become spirit, or the monad, on the path of identification, and that is her groups 9 and 10. And we see that groups 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 have mastered the things having to do with the physical plane and are primarily on the emotional plane. So the integrated personality is somebody who has gone through all of these levels on her model. By the way, these colors were not created by her, they were created by me. The soul-infused personality, which is going to be groups 7 and 8, is on the mental plane, and groups 9 and 10, monad, or path of identification, is going to be more on the intuitional or spiritual plane, or Buddhic or Atmic plane. Now, this is a chart which has a compilation of all the different levels and terms used by Alice Bailey. This is not the video to describe all of these. I will do another video of that. This is just to try and orientate you a little bit to her highly complex model. So here we have the mental plane, and here we have the emotional plane with this particular bracket here. Let me get the pointer out. I will need it for this video. So here are the 7 subplanes of the plane of the mental plane, the 7 subplanes of the emotional plane, and the physical plane. And here we start to see certain things associated with these. The subplanes, colors, which I have created. I don't necessarily like all the words that are associated with these colors. I did it from a color wheel I found online. The groups, which is what we're focusing on. Something which I call the evolutionary names. The petals of the egoic lotus. The chela names. The techniques that we use to try and move forward on the spiritual path. Group 6 at the Materialist is using primarily the technique of integration phase. Group 6 Aspirants is using primarily the technique of integration alignment phase. The initiations that are being worked on, and the rules of the road, which start primarily, I believe, right here. These are my compilations that I have done of these different terms based upon my understanding of her model. I've had to adjust this dozens of times over the many years that I've worked on it. There might be a tweak here and there in the future. So see this as where I stand right now. This is the integral model, and there are some basic things to it. Here are their stages of development, which is what we're going to take a look at in this video, which are like the different groups that Bailey uses. This has to do with how the mind develops, and that was in the 6 types of mind. I talked a little bit about how Bailey's 6 types of mind line up with this. Integral has a little bit of types. They talk about things like the Enneagram, Jung's archetypes. Bailey has her 7 ray types. She also has the astrological types. I have created a master chart of Bailey's integral model where I include things like her types, her levels of mind, how she would see the fourfold views of individual, group, interior, and exterior that integral has, and her understanding of states of consciousness. I'm not going to talk about that here. I'll do that in another video. I just want to give you a basic understanding of the integral model. And here we have the two, in terms of the stages of development, side by side. And here are the main stages of Bailey found in her groups. Here are the developmental altitudes, or ego development stages, as they're called in the integral model. And here's some correlations. Integrals infrared has some correlations with Bailey's group 1. Integrals magenta with Bailey's group 2. Integrals red with Bailey's group 3. And 1 and 2 line up pretty good with what Bailey has to say about her groups. Red, there's some, overall it lines up, but there's some problems there. Go watch my video on group 3 red for that. Group 4 lines up pretty good with integrals amber. Group 5 lines up pretty good with integrals amber expert. You see they have this little expert level that doesn't have a particular color associated with it, but it kind of bleeds into orange and amber in their model. That pretty much fits with Bailey's group 5. Group 6, we're going to take a look at, especially in terms of the group 6 materialist, which I've divided into 2 different groups here. I didn't talk about that in my materialist video. I talked about that in my online writings on my Ageless Wisdom versus Integral online site. And then what I call the group 6 aspirant and how it lines up with green. So we're going to stop there and take a look, because especially as we get into group 6 materialist and aspirant compared to integrals orange and green, there's some real differences, and that's what this video is about. I want to mention something briefly. Integral has this thing called tiers. And this is a quote from one of Ken Wilber's books. And yet only an integral view possesses that understanding, which means as evolution continues to move into integral levels, society is poised for perhaps the most momentous transformation in its entire history, a profoundly and truly inclusive orientation, what Graves calls that monumental leap in meaning. There's been nothing like it before in history because there's never been a tier transformation before, certainly nothing like this one. All previous transformations were stage transformations. The transformation from the pluralistic stage to the integral stage is also and simultaneously a transformation from first tier to second tier, and that is epic, revolutionary, and utterly unprecedented. We don't even have any examples of how to construct a radically inclusive, all-rung, all-view society where all views are given a voice, perhaps differently weighted, but a voice nevertheless, as each stage of development becomes a welcome station in life. And that's from Ken Wilber's Religion of Tomorrow. That was in the Kindle edition. So why am I bringing this up? Because it's not really true that only an integral view, possesses the understanding. One of the whole reasons I started this is there was a view long before integral, about 100 years ago, that was put forward by a woman named Alice Bailey. And the whole idea of tiers is basically followed in her model, only they're called initiations in her model. And it's not really true that it's utterly unprecedented and we don't have any examples. There's like books and books that Bailey wrote about how this could look. Not that that's the end all or the be all of how it's going to look, but there was already stuff being written all the way back in the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s. 1940s. So just wanted to let you know that. Here's Bailey's model. So first tier is connected in some ways to her first initiation. I say in some ways because there's a number of ways that they don't line up here. So do not confuse integral's first tier as if it is Bailey's first initiation. It has some rudimentary elements of Bailey's first initiation in it. There's integral's second tier. Bailey has a second initiation. Integral has a third tier. Bailey has a third initiation. Bailey actually has 9 initiations. So she already has proposed 9 tiers with stages that belong to each tier. just to let you know. And that's one reason why I still enjoy her model, even though it's unbelievably complicated and hard to follow. And that's why I've tried to simplify it for you all so that it's easier for you to follow. But really important, these tiers and initiations do not line up exactly correct. I'm just trying to show you that when we do a comparison between the two, there was such a thing before Integral put all this out almost 100 years ago. Having said that, let's now do what I promised in this video. Let's look at group 6. And group 6 here I have theorized is on the first, second, and third emotional planes. Originally, I broke the group 6 materialist into an A and a B and made group 6 aspirant a C here. And the reason I did that is I was trying to fit these different groups on the subplanes of the emotional plane. That my associations may or may not be correct. I'm just making a theory here. And one of the things I distinguished about B was that B, they're pretending more, is one of the things that I said, that they are trying to look to the masses, like the group 5 masses and the Amber expert and Amber masses, groups 4 and 5 in Bailey, Amber expert in the Wilbur model, that the group 6 materialist, what I was theorizing, the B part, are trying to look like they are the same as those groups when they're really not. They're doing a lot of things that when they're by themselves, they kind of chuckle and know that they're not like that, and they call those in groups 5 and 4 and Amber expert the kind of sheep of the human race, the sheeples. You know, they follow people like Ayn Rand, etc. That's more down here. But here, they're trying to make it look, for the sake of getting more money, pleasure, sex, and power, like they conform to group 5 stuff, all knowing that they don't behind the scenes. And they just don't care when they're by themselves that they don't conform. It's just all manipulation to them. So that was the distinction I was trying to make that isn't necessarily in the Bailey books. So when we're comparing the integral model to the Alice Bailey model, there's some important things to understand. First of all, as I'm understanding the integral model, they see things more about perspective. How many perspectives can you get? Going from first person to second person to here we have in their orange third person and in their green fourth person perspective. Bailey sees it more about a problem of desire, that they're immersed in the realm of desire. And yes, you can get greater perspectives, but that's not really what the main difficulty is, gaining greater perspectives in the Bailey model. It's much more about understanding the realm of desire and how to break out of it. Integral sees as you progress that you're becoming more intelligent, and especially in orange, you become much more rational. Bailey would argue with that. You are becoming more rational in terms of formal operations. That's true. She would call that more personality mind, but you're still colored by your emotions a lot. And that's why she has group 6 on the emotional plane, and why I've put it on the first, second, and third levels from above down on the emotional plane in my theory. Integral says that we are learning to encompass greater and greater wholes. That is true in the Bailey model, but we're trying to shift from encompassing the whole out there in the world, which integrated personalities in group 6 very much are integrated into the outer world, to shifting away from integration just in the outer world to what we see and understand and perceive and intuit in the inner worlds, and integrating into that and creating greater and greater wholes within that. So there's more of an emphasis on outer integration and inner integration, on outer wholes and inner wholes in her model than I see in Integral. I'm sure Integral would say, hey, well, we believe that, we do that, and they could point out things here and there, but it just doesn't seem to be as emphasized as it is in the Bailey model. And the Integral model is all about discovering personhood, and that is also true, especially at group 6, becoming the individual, the integrated personality in the Bailey model. But personhood isn't really the thing as you keep going in the Bailey model beyond group 6. But in general, These are some ways that Integral summarizes green and orange, and Bailey summarizes group 6. Another thing that Bailey emphasizes, however, is that in group 6, we reach the heights of selfishness, and then as an aspirant, we start to break through that. That is not something that you see emphasized in the integral model. Let's look more at the particulars. So here I have in larger what Integral has said in their particular chart, and a larger view of my chart that I have made from Bailey. So here are the similarities of orange compared to Bailey's group 6 materialist. That's up here, group 6 materialist. So we have in the integral that orange has third person perspective in linear time. And Bailey also sees that that's the case, but linear time is still being trapped in the realm of the 5 senses. So yes, group 6 has a lot more perspective in the realm of the 5 senses in linear time, the same as orange does, but that's not really the point for the Bailey model. In the integral model, orange is becoming intelligent and more rational. And there's similarities to that in the Bailey model, especially when you understand what she calls her personality mind. In integral, cognizing greater and greater wholes, we already talked about that. They have a tendency to a self-chosen belief system. You also see that Bailey's group 6 integrated personality does that same kind of thing. They're like, they choose what they want to believe or not. They don't have to conform to the group 5 rules and norms. They've broken out of that. And that's really freeing for them in a way. But then they're stuck in that glamour of freedom, she calls it. The orange person in the integral model is highly effective, and we see the same thing in the Bailey model. She says that integrated personalities are highly effective and versatile. Some differences in the integral orange model, it says that they're focused on the scientific method. See that up here? The Bailey model would disagree somewhat with that because she believes that they're still prone to scientism because emotions and desires still color their perception of results or other influences like lobbyists or the money that's influencing medical research, etc. It's still too much colored by the desire for my reputation if I make this breakthrough, or the money I'm going to get to keep helping me live my lifestyle or help my institution move forward. And so it's not really science yet. She says science, the true scientific view, doesn't come about until we get into group 8. In the integral model, orange is objective. And that's not necessarily so in the Bailey model. They think they're objective, but they're still colored a lot by emotion and desire. They'll just tend to not admit to it. In the integral model, orange is conscientious. Right there, that word. Not really in the group 6 Bailey view of it. They tend to be more Ayn Rand type, and I had that in my group 6 materialist video, discussed the influence that Bailey didn't know Ayn Rand. You know, some of the things that she said in her system go very much hand in hand with the kinds of things that Ayn Rand have said. That's in my group 6 materialist video. It's just that group 6 materialist and even the aspirants aren't really that conscientious. The group 6 green aspirants, connected more to maybe integral green, are going to be a little bit more conscientious, but they still easily can have mixed motives and can be very selfish. And that's why in group 6, especially at the materialist stage, she says that there is a trend towards oligarchy, dictatorship, and other ways in terms of desire. Remember, a big difference between the models is the Bailey model emphasizes a lot the problem of desire and how it influences the groups as they develop. Watch my group 6 aspirant problems video where I talk about desire in the later part of the video and how it's connected to all of her groups. Now let's take a brief look at green. Similarities. In the integral model, their green level is a discovery of a unique subjective reality. And we see that that is true in Bailey's group 6 aspirant. I called it group 6C here, but there's aspirant right there. They're just starting to open up to the reality of realms beyond the five senses to get more into the subjective world. And you see some of that with the green as well in the integral model. In integral, their green has multiple competing systems, and that is similar to what you see with Bailey's Group 6 aspirant, in that they tend to be scattered in their approach, creating a spiritual smorgasbord, dabbling with this teacher, this teaching, going to this Tibetan Buddhist initiation and that one, and not necessarily creating a cohesive whole. They're competing against each other. They're not yet integral or integrated, to use a phrase from Wilbur. Green tends to be effective. That's similar to what we saw already. That starts with group 6 materialist and continues with the group 6 aspirant. They tend to be highly effective and versatile. Green tends to be able to have their self-chosen belief system, and we see that as true with the group 6 aspirant. It's just that belief system is more likely to be chosen. Again, the emphasis on desire in a form of spiritual materialism in the Bailey model. So long as I'm spiritual and I still get all the money, security, sex, pleasure, power I want, and now I'm spiritual, yay for me. That's not emphasized as much, those distortions in the integral model. They're emphasized a lot more in the Bailey teachings with the aspirant. In the integral model, there's a sense of oneness, but there's not the understanding of the diversity. There's unity, but not diversity. So they tend to get rid of plurality. And you see that pretty much similar in the group 6 Bailey model, where there's the sense of oneness, but it's like a platitude. We're all one. There's no real discernment. As we get closer and closer, as we move through the mental plane, and the aspirants just barely moving out of the emotional plane into the mental plane in the Bailey model, we get more and more discernment. Discernment can be a dirty word for green. In the integral, it can be a dirty word for the group 6 aspirant as well. And why is that? Because in the Bailey model, they say that's because there's more of a rush to become enlightened. They want it all right now. So they don't want to have to get into the complexities of things. Remember, they're not really on the mental plane. They may have a pretty good stock mental body. They may be professor of a university, head of a corporation or something, but they're not really wanting to get into the complexities of that in terms of the interior world and how it may impact their ability to get their desires met, if we want to talk about the Bailey model. Differences. Green, the integral says, builds on orange's ability to be conscientious. And again, with the Bailey group 6 aspirant, those motives are really mixed. They can be conscientious at times, and other times they're just going to get rid of it or justify not being that way or other things. In the integral model, green continues the scientific method. I already mentioned that in the group 6 aspirant model, both their approach to the outer and the inner realms can still be more scientism. It can still be pretty unscientific. They may start to do some scientific work on the inner realms, a little bit here and there at the aspirant group 6 stage. That's going to happen a lot more at group 7 and especially group 8, because remember, a truly scientific approach doesn't happen, especially in regards to the inner realms, until we get more into group 8 in the Bailey model. So to say they're using a scientific method in the Bailey model, it's more like they're dabbling in one, or they're applying it and it's just too colored with their own biases and they're not willing to admit it. In the integral model green, again, the emphasis is on their objective, and in the group 6 aspirant model in Bailey, there's much more acknowledgement that that objectivity can fly out the window, especially as ambition and desire creep back in. And we already talked a little bit about conscientious. In the Bailey group 6 aspirant model, they're just beginning to become more conscientious and humanitarian. In the integral model, green has unique experience of many selves. And in the Bailey model, what's interesting is that unique experience of many selves in multiple contexts is borrowed in integral originally from something called psychosynthesis. Well, psychosynthesis and subpersonalities were invented by a Bailey student named Roberto Saggioli. He was one of her main disciples. But the group 6 aspirant may know about psychosynthesis, may dabble in psychosynthesis and think it's fun, or explore subpersonalities, but that's still primarily going to be for the satisfaction of one's own desires or to helping them become an integrated personality in Bailey's system, it's not sufficiently going to be used to become a soul infused personality until you get into later groups in the Bailey model. Then you'll use that approach to psychosynthesis in a different way. So that's a very brief understanding of the differences between these two groups. Again, if you want to support this work, subscribe to this channel. That way you'll know when new videos are coming out. Sometimes they come out in a week. Sometimes one comes out a month. Some of these are a lot of hard work, and I have to do a job on the side here, offering spiritual guidance and counseling to people. So if you want to help me do more of these, think about becoming a Patreon. There's the link to help do that if you want, and there's some benefits for becoming a patron as well. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this very brief video.